Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, or good morning, in case you're watching this later. I always have to be cognizant of the fact that everybody doesn't watch live. So I'm super excited to be here with you. My name is Marcy L. Thomas. I'm the founder of Brown Girl Collective and, of course, the BGC Book Club, which has been around since actually April. Next month will make 3 years I've been doing BGC Book Club, and I really enjoy it so much because it's an opportunity for me to be able to talk to wonderful Black women writers, because we center them here and the stories that they have to tell. So as you're coming on in the room, just let us know where you're joining us from. If it's your first time, just anything that you would like for us to know. As I've already mentioned, I am Marcy. I am currently residing on the outside of ATL, originally from Cleveland, Ohio, with a bunch of other places in between. So it's just really exciting to be here once again and talk to you all about a story that has sparked my imagination just about some things in my own personal family history, and I'm sure it will do the same for you as well. So by means of introduction, tonight we're going to be talking about Moonrise Over New Jessup by Jamila Minnicks. Now, she is the author of this award-winning book. Actually, it's the 2021 winner of the PEN Bellwether Prize for socially engaged fiction. Her work is also published in Craft Literary Magazine, The Right Launch, and The Silent World in Her Vase. Her piece, Politics of Distraction, was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. She graduated from the University of Michigan. I didn't tell her I actually lived in Michigan for a while, so we can talk about that. The Howard University School of Law and Georgetown University. And she's currently living in one of my favorite cities, Washington, D.C. So without any further delay, let's welcome Jamila to the room. Welcome.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes, I'm super excited to see you, to meet you, to have an opportunity to talk about this wonderful work that is getting a lot of buzz, has won some prizes, and you're just really doing a lot of great things and telling these stories. So welcome once again.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. So Jamila, just tell us a little bit about your journey towards writing this award-winning book. How awesome is that?
Well, I started writing seriously about in 2018. I participated in NaNoWriMo, wrote a book, a 745-page book that's in a drawer somewhere. It's a great idea. Needs a lot of work. And I wrote a couple of short pieces, and I was actually going to sort of work on the 745-page manuscript again when this story started calling to me. And, my people are Alabama. You and I talked a little bit before. My people are at least 4 generations Alabama that I know of. I grew up knowing a very rich and unique history of Black people in Alabama. We have this sort of defiant love for the soil. So I thought I was just going to sit down and write a short fiction piece. And it was just going to be a family sitting around the table debating the merits of Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954 when Brown was decided. And so, you've read the book, there would obviously be a Percy there running his mouth and Pop running his mouth and, Dot and everybody be running their mouths. But I thought in my vision, Alice was the one who's sort of standing there holding the turkey with her sort of Alabama smile. Like, I don't need to jump into this because they know my mind on it. But, I think about when we look at photographs, how we can sit around a family gathering or something. We're looking at pictures and we can name Percy because we know what he was saying. We can name Pop and Dot and everybody. When somebody asks, who's the lady holding the turkey, 1 or 2 generations later, we don't remember her name. And so that's when I knew this was Alice's story, and that's when I knew it was a novel.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. Well, I'm going to backtrack just for a second because you said NaNoWriMo. I know what that is, but there are people who might not know what that is.
Okay. So November has been deemed, among many other things, it's the National Novel Writing Month. So they encourage you to write 50,000 words, up to 50,000 words in a month. And it's really a way for people in the writing community to sit down and say, it's time for us to get to work and put whatever is in our head on the page. And it really has been a catalyst for people, for some novels that may have never been written. It wasn't the catalyst for this one.
Okay.
It certainly got me thinking more seriously about writing and craft and, what my writing life and everything could look like.
Yeah, and I'm just amazed that you say you started writing this in 2018, and 3 years later you won an award.
Well, so I started MOONRISE Over New Jessup. I started that in June of 2020.
Oh, so
And
that's even wow. Okay, so how quickly did you write this?
but you know what? I always say this is a story about my people in Alabama, and so much of this is on my heart. I grew up with these stories, anecdotes, some of them on my heart. So it was really a matter of becoming the writer, maturing into the writer who could put this book down, in a way that it deserved to be told. Because I wanted to tell stories of ancestors that I had never met.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed to grow into the writer to become that, which is why it took about 2 years of just writing practice in order for me to mature into the writer who could write MOONRISE Over New Jessup.
Wow, starting during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, question now, I did not say it specifically. I said that you went to law school. Are you still practicing, or were you still practicing at the time that you wrote the book?
I was practicing at the time I wrote the book. I am now, I call myself a recovering lawyer.
Yes.
Because I felt like with my writing, and I do feel like with my writing, it's a much better opportunity for me to be out here using my voice to affect change. Mm-hmm. So I learned so much practicing law and met some really incredible people. But at the end of the day, I was raised to be an advocate for my community. And I think writing is the best way for me to do that.
Absolutely. And you definitely do that through MOONRISE Over New Jessup. As I was reading, of course, it takes place, and I'm going to let you tell, what's going on, but it takes place, in the past, but there were so many things that I could find relevant to things that are going on today. So I definitely understand how you won the award for socially engaged, because it does bring up questions that we are still grappling with today. So just to give everybody a little insight into what the book is about for those who haven't had a chance to be blessed by it yet.
Oh, sure. So MOONRISE Over New Jessup follows the story of Alice Young, who gets off the bus in New Jessup, Alabama in 1957. New Jessup is an all-Black settlement or enclave. It's not quite a town, but it's a place where Black people have been living on, quote, their side of the woods for about 60 years. And in this place, Black people are thriving. So we have savings and loans, schools, churches, hotels, we have business districts. We have the Campbell family owns an auto shop. It's a really thriving side of town. So, and where they really question the value of integration, which is where the sort of short story piece of it came from. So Alice gets off the bus and she's from Rensselaer, Alabama. And she's like, I've never seen anything like this. She's on her way to Chicago to find her sister, and she decides to stay a while. Falls in love with the town and this young man named Raymond Campbell. And Raymond is a grandson of a town father who has courted a civil rights organization in town, not for the purpose of integration, but for the purpose of helping them to improve their political and economic circumstances. But because New Jessup is like, we don't want to hear anything about SNCC, the NAACP, the SCLC, we don't want to hear anything about any of it. We're fine the way we are. They still run the risk of being run out of town. This is Alice's story, and it's her story of how she supports this man, and she's side by side with him so he can become the man who becomes somebody who can then move a movement forward. I envision her as like the Corettas and the Bettys and the Murleys, like before these men ever had an inkling of a dream, when these men were just trying to come into their own and they needed somebody like an Alice by their side. So it's very much her story from the beginning to the end. It tells a side of our history that we really don't get to see about Black towns and settlements, tells varying viewpoints about what Black empowerment and the future of Black people in this country looks like or can look like, and the beauty of our communities when we're just sort of in community minding our own Black business.
Right. Right. And that's one of the things that really, resonated, just what was going on at that time. So for those who may not be aware that there were Black towns, I know I went to in your town, I was there back in October, and I went to the Black Smithsonian, or Blacksonian as some people call it. Blacksonian, and there were a few places in there that talked about some of these types of towns. So for those who haven't had the experience of going there or don't know about these Black towns, just give us a little insight to what they were.
So, like you would have a place that could be, there were lots of places, like for example, in like New Orleans, where it'd be a family or two who owned a couple of city blocks. It would be places where we had been formerly enslaved people. It would be the actual quarters. So you'll hear neighborhoods called the quarters or the bottoms. We would, after emancipation, we would take those areas over. If we were able to, we would buy the land, and then we would build from there and keep buying and building and buying and building. They were, the sides of the places did vary. So, there was Eatonville, Florida, where Zora Neale Hurston is from. Hobson City, I had to shout out Hobson City, Alabama, because it's Alabama. It's the oldest Black municipality. So they got all the way to municipal status. And I think around their height, they're up to about 14,000 people.
Wow.
So, and I think most of us are familiar, hopefully we are becoming more familiar with places like Greenwood, which was a Black side of town, but it was a business district. And Greenwood, between 1905 and 1921, was built up so much that it was the Black Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, it was Black people living well. But I think about the businesses and the resources that we had for one another when we were forced to make a way out of no way and do for each other. I mean, Greenwood even had photography studios, taking photos of us. And to think about how expensive that technology must have been back then, to know that they had multiple photography studios is just something that really inspires me to think about when I think about our ancestors and elders. So, these places ranged in size, but there were about 1,200 of them starting from the late 1800s. And then as recently, I'm sure you're aware of Freedom, Georgia, which was founded a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just powerful to think that those spaces existed and that still do exist.
Absolutely.
And I mean, wow, it's just so much, because I'm thinking about the fact that just like in this book, you have people who are for it and you have people who are against it and all of that. But there's a certain level of power that comes with being able to be amongst your people and to build and to have everything that you need within the space of your community, and how things have changed so much for us since we have gotten away from having spaces like that.
Well, my people came up in Marengo County in Demopolis, Alabama. My mom grew up in a place called Baptist Hill. And, I came up believing that you could see it. She came up thinking you can see it, you can be it. So she had Black teachers. My uncles largely were educators. My aunts were largely women who worked in healthcare. And so when you see a doctor, you can be a doctor. We knew and we expected excellence of one another. I think now, and particularly when I went to Howard, we go into these Black spaces and we have teachers who then say, we turn around and say, I got an A on this test. And I had this professor at Howard who would sort of look at you like, what else, like, tell me something.
Right.
Because that just means you were doing what you were supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. There's this expectation of excellence that we have for ourselves in these communities that is so empowering to me. And I really wanted to show that in the book.
Yes, it is. It is empowering. One of the reasons why I originally founded Brown Girl Collective was to have a space to tell stories, some of these historical stories. And admittedly so, I've been focusing a lot more on books and interviews and things like that, but it's something I'm going to get back to, because there are so many. I know there's a rich, vast amount of people and places and things that are of importance, and that they do serve as means of encouragement for us to know what's possible, what's available to us and what's possible. And it's just so important.
Absolutely. And if we can, reach out sometimes for a helping hand. We know we're in spaces where we can reach out for a helping hand, and we're also in spaces where we can offer one. And how empowering is that to know that we can be vulnerable at our most vulnerable selves, but we're also in these places where then we can become our best selves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So if you don't mind, you say you have a little excerpt for us so everyone can get an idea of how beautifully written this story is.
Thank you.
I mean, it has a beautiful cover, number
Thank
one.
you.
I love the cover, I love flowers. I love the cover, but the words within are equally as beautiful.
Well, I'll read this, and then at one point, maybe we'll talk about the cover because there's a story behind that too.
Okay. All right.
All right. So I'm just going to read about 5 minutes from the very beginning, just so I can sort of welcome y'all into New Jessup, if you don't mind, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. And it's for my mama in her place among the stars. The moon rises and sets, stitching eternity together, night by night. Love-spun thread binds family when even years or the blue skies stand between one and another's touch. Generations travel the same footprints, reach hands to the same climbing branches, and warm the same brown skin under the Alabama sun. Maybe family brings to mind only blood, marital relations, and it's easy to understand that way of thinking. But love by my hands tethers generations to generations, as well as kin by skin, in this place where all in me and of me can thrive. Yet even the strongest thread will snap with constant tension and no slack. The heavens overflow with memories lost. So, as life requires, I hold taut and I give. In some ways, my people know, if in some they never will. But in all ways, my moon rises and sets for family. So, in eternity, the time had come for me to leave the home where I was born. The sun was setting, and the half-balled red sweet gum around the fields announced November, just a few days coming. But 1957 was still October old when my landlord ended up face down on the ground for trying to drag me behind him to the tool shed. I was the last to leave the home house in Rensselaer. Daddy had passed a couple weeks before, and I had settled him next to Mama, though his burial left me scrambling for the rent. My sister Rosie was rooming with a nice family in Chicago doing hair, and my need to keep a roof over my head had mellowed my worry to wonder about when her next letter would arrive. There was plenty of gleaning left to make November's payment, and then I'd scratch around for whatever came available to buy myself some time. I had never planned or wanted to leave Alabama, but with old man Todd shouting curses at my back, his face split open and gushing sweet gum red, my plans to stay began to fade. After a night at the neighbor's and an hours-long walk with the dawn, I arrived at the bus station with just my thrown-together knapsack. The man behind the counter assured me that my little money would carry me to Birmingham, not Nashville or Louisville or Cleveland, let alone Chicago. Birmingham, he said, and no further. In the hours I waited on the bus to depart, my world came undone piece by piece. Unable to get to a place I never wanted to go, with ticket in hand to a place I knew not a single soul first, the landscape flattened. Direction was next, north, south, east, west, all headed towards the unfamiliar, then finally color, till everything faded to black and white. I rode the bus into this flat, directionless, colorless world until it shushed to a stop in my new home. Not that I knew it at the time. No, my ticket read Birmingham, and all I knew was that we had stopped somewhere between nowhere in particular and the big city. We had traveled 100 country miles and maybe 10, stopped once, twice, 4 times. I don't know. I was huddled against my window watching the world blur by as the man seated next to me kept up one-sided conversation about returning north after visiting with his wife and children down country. Somewhere along the way, he started worrying me about the brown paper bag on my lap and the chicken grease soaking through to my dress, but that oily stain hardly ruined anything. The gray threads had known color when I first sewed it, red plaid, but that stain just turned light gray to ash and ash gray to black, so somewhere near Needham, I offered him the chicken. He took it and finally left me alone. We shushed to a stop and the bus emptied, some getting off, hugging loved ones hello, some taking luggage from the belly of the bus, and most everybody stretching, smiling, and laughing underneath the blue sky day. But the stops were all the same to me, so I stayed inside with my head against the glass, feeling the sun's warmth against the window. And that's when a red-heeled shoe clicked its way up the sidewalk. Two of them, if I'm honest, though it wasn't so much the shoes that caught my eye, but the bronze stocking legs inside them. They continued up the way towards the sidewalk cafe before disappearing through the front door. And I'll stop there.
Good. Oh, and I love the way you read.
Thank you.
Very theatrical.
I came up hearing stories told, so I tell it the way I hear the women in my family telling stories. So.
I love it. And actually, as you were reading, we had someone with a comment I wanted to share. Mm-hmm. So I just purchased it, looking forward to reading it. Appreciate your pearls of wisdom regarding your journey to becoming a writer.
Thank you.
Now, these people are loving your voice. Got another one. You have a very soulful voice. Lovely intro.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here. I don't know why I wasn't on screen. I don't know if you can see me, but I'm just smiling. I'm cheesy.
No, I couldn't see you. All I saw was my face. I didn't want to see your face.
Beautiful reading voice. I feel transported to that.
Oh,
absolutely.
I hope.
Absolutely.
That was the whole point with writing the intro like that. Like, she's on a journey and she's coming into this place, and in the next part, you see her eyes open to what's before her, and she can't believe it. So I appreciate that. Thank you all so much.
Yes. But it really gives you an idea of how you write. And I mean, just as she's reading it, of course you don't get the beauty of that voice, but but just the way that it's written and, the lyricism and everything within the story, it shows up there. So
thank you.
It's interesting because seeing Alice, she leaves home because on the heels of a lot of things that have happened to her that really aren't good things, really, kind of a traumatic situation. And it just made me think of how many times do people run away or feel the need to run away?
Exactly. And, I'm so glad that you said it like that there's a lot going on, right? She's lost her daddy, and that's her parent died. Her daddy died. Mm-hmm. And then she's looking for her sister. Her sister has gone to Chicago. And so she's in this space of sort of longing for her that you see sort of fueling her throughout the book. And then she's also had this encounter with her landlord. And these are the things that when I talk to sometimes audiences and they say, well, why did it have to be all these things? And I say, because that's what life is for us. We don't get to separate out and say, on this day I experienced racism, and then on this day my daddy died. Like, that's just how that is our lives. And so it was important to show that she's in this space where she's having to make decisions, and excuse me, and it's not one thing driving the narrative.
Right. And I mean, that's our lives, is a lot of times we are dealing with a whole bunch of different things.
That's right.
That's real. We don't operate in a silo where it's just like, this is this and there's nothing else happening around me. So, but it's funny because she left, on a particular journey thinking she's going to be able to go a lot further away, and really winds up right up the street.
She's good. And that's the thing. Like, she's like, I don't know if I got 100 country miles or 10. A country mile could be long or short.
Right.
I've been in cars and people are like, we only have a mile to go. And 30 minutes later, we still haven't traveled that much.
Right.
So, I think that she's in that space. But what I love about it is she gets there and you'll see her sort of encounter a shoe shine man in that scene, and there's the man that gives her a dime to go get a Coca-Cola and stuff. And so Alice comes to this place that is us, and she realizes that. And so while maybe the shoe shine man, none of these men in this book save her. Right. Alice is all Alabama from the beginning now. She's smart and she's determined, she's resilient, and she knows her own mind. She's not going anywhere to be saved. But what happens is she comes into this place where she can be vulnerable for a spell, for that time. And then somebody sees her and says, this is how I can help you in this very discreet way. And then somebody else says, this is how I can help you in this very small way that could change her life. And I feel like in our communities, that's how then she becomes this woman. She grows into all the things that she's able to bring all these attributes to the table that she's already had in New Jessup, and she can grow and thrive and then bring other people along. And that's how community works.
Mm-hmm. And, the thing that was like just ringing in my ear, safe space, is that oftentimes we don't have safe spaces, and actually where Alice is coming from was not a safe space for a variety of reasons. So it might have been at one time, but it isn't any longer. Right. And, just the fact that she was to go into a place and be received, to be welcomed, to be embraced. People aren't asking a whole lot of questions about who are you and where did you come from and all of that. It's not a lot of that. It's just they saw someone in need and they extended that hand to help her.
Well, and I see that even today. How many times you walk into a situation or somebody walks into your situation? I think as Black people, we have a sort of innate ability to see that somebody has a need. They don't need to verbalize it. They don't need to say, this is the particular trauma I just suffered that got me to this place, or this is how I'm hurting. But we know, we have, I feel like an innate sense of when we're hurting. And so when we see that about ourselves, we are also in a really unique position to help one another. Mm-hmm. So, she encounters one person, then another. They don't have to ask a whole lot of questions. They know what hurt looks like. And so they're extending what little help they can extend to her, and then saying, instead of just letting her go and struggle in places and get on that bus and then struggle in parts unknown.
Yeah, that's just really powerful to see that. And when it happens, even now, it's a beautiful thing.
Isn't it though? Isn't that everything?
Yes, when you can walk into a community and be like, yeah, these are my people. This is, and my best friend is watching my tribe. This is my tribe. She has been saying that all the time. I'm looking for my tribe.
That's right.
When you can find your tribe. But, in the midst of this, a few things are happening with her because, of course, she goes to work, because she's on her own in this space. And I love the fact that, one of the places that she's working is for, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but you'll tell me, the seamstress. She goes and works for the seamstress.
Oh, Miss Vivian?
Yeah, Miss Vivian.
Yes.
And I mean, she's like this, powerful woman who makes all these beautiful clothes and things like that. But she goes to work with her and learns things and expands upon the things that she even learned as a young girl back in her hometown.
She sure does. And, I think Alice, as she grows, like I said, she's all Alabama. So she comes to New Jessup. She's raised by a loving family. So she comes to New Jessup full of hope and full of these things. But this is a place where she can actually thrive and grow into her gifts and talents. So when she meets Miss Vivian, and Miss Vivian sees that Alice somehow had nerve to cut down something that she designed. Okay, let me see what this child is talking about. Right. Let me see what she's done. And she sees that, just like with everything else, Alice may have just learned to use that sewing machine, but she's expert in the idea and in the design of what she's done. And so she sees somebody who she can work with. And, like she says, she looked me over with a look practiced in finding flaws. This lady knew what she wanted in somebody like me. And so she decided to give me a chance. And, because of all these opportunities, then Alice can grow in to become the moonrise to pull everybody else's tides, because she can flourish in this community.
And that she does. And then, of course, she meets Raymond, her boo, who becomes her boo. He becomes a credit to his Martin. And even that is just really interesting because for her, she has to kind of grapple with some different things like, do I really believe in what he's doing? And all of that. Talk a little bit about that, how sometimes, maybe a person can be involved with someone and love that person, but have kind of mixed feelings about that work that they're doing.
Well, I think at the very beginning, she's grappling with, because she doesn't really understand the nuance of what he's trying to do. She understands the National Negro Advancement Society, which is the fictional organization that he's working with, is a nationwide organization that's talked very much about integration. And so she's like, I don't understand why you're trying to bring them here to New Jessup. I don't understand that. And so for a little bit in there, she's very resistant because she's just like, this is not for us. This is not, I don't know where you fell and bumped your head, but this is New Jessup, Alabama. Right. So we don't need that. But once she really understands the mission, what they've convinced the national organization is right for New Jessup, they've further convinced the national organization could be right for other Black localities around the country. And this sort of nationalism movement that he's trying to lead, she's like, I'm with this man. I'm all in. But her thing is, I'm not going to the meetings. Like I said, she's the one holding the turkey. She said that my mind on it. I'm not going to be in your business about it. I'm going to support you. But then she's also, because they have to do this organizing under the cover of darkness, she's also having to hold a lot of secrets. And so, that's where she's balancing these loyalties to New Jessup and to Raymond. And it's not a conflict because everybody wants Black empowerment. They all want independence. But it's just this idea that people may react in a way that gets them put out of town before they can really get the work done.
Right. And, no spoilers. So I'm going to ask these questions in a way that doesn't give away too much. But basically, the thing is, they've been operating under this system where they're a part of a community, a larger community, and they have like their little corner carved out. They are thriving, but they would like to be, they're surviving. They would like to be able to thrive even more so with economic resources.
Well, economic resources, and also keep in mind, this is a time when voter disenfranchisement in Alabama was rampant. And so, they're trying to take steps to improve their political and economic circumstances. I mean, even in communities where we were living and we had, which the book does not shy away from, even when we were self-reliant, independent, in our schools, for example, we would get school books, textbooks, and materials from the white schools, and they would be used secondhand. The school books would be largely out of date, and they would come to the schools and they would have all this nastiness just scribbled in them, all these epithets and all these things, just as a reminder that you can be across the woods or whatever you think you're doing, but we have this first. And we, with, I don't know if it was the blessing or whatever of the teachers, but these students were writing all sorts of nastiness to our children who were then supposed to learn from these books. So, Raymond and I'll say Raymond, the fella's impatience. Right. Impatience. They want to do away with that. And the way that they see that is by having their own real municipality where they're in control of their own resources and their own budgets and their own schools and everything.
And thank you for clarifying that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, but one of the things that it made me think about now is think of the communities that we have wherein things are based on, taxation, or, certain areas get all the money, even though everybody's paying taxes, but certain people don't get access to the same resources as others. And this is really, kind of a precursor in this book because of the timeline to some of the things that we're still seeing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I visited cities and talked to folks, people who are on the council who are having fights about, the rich or the predominantly white side of town. The councilmen are pushing for a pickleball court. I guess pickleball is a thing right now, and I guess everybody wants it. No shade if you're into pickleball, no shade. But what I will say is, on the predominantly Black side of town, for system to be extended to, and when you have that sort of disparity like that to me is a no-brainer. But we're still having those conversations in 2022, 2023. So it's absolutely a question of resources and how our elected officials are representing our interests.
Or are they?
Are they?
Sometimes or are they? Sometimes they are not. Another thing, just in the whole context of this town, they have their space, they're doing their thing, they're living their lives, they are doing well. And the thought of it is, if you start making these changes or you start talking about these changes, people are going to come in and try to take away what we already have.
Yeah, and I think that's the Black damp, right? Like, that's the overarching thing that Alice is always pushing against. Why are we always talking about whiteness and white folks and white mischief? And on the one hand, you can't escape it. I mean, New Jessup came from white mischief. I know I saw somebody say, this is a good book, but nothing really happens. And, people are wanting to see sort of endless pages of trauma, and then like our redeeming ourselves from the ashes. I'm here to tell a story about us and our people, right? And I feel like by doing it this way, we get to know life. And like how people say, if you can't love me while I'm here, don't mourn me when I'm gone.
Right.
So, I think it's important when we talk about Alice and New Jessup and all the folks that we really try to find a way to appreciate how they lived. And, in that is the fact that we do have, like we were talking about earlier, we have to deal with whiteness and white supremacy and anti-Blackness, even in spaces like this. But in this book, as in these spaces, it's us, it's Black people living among Black people, what our lives look like every day. We've absolutely been shaped by our time in this country, on this soil. But what does that actually look like when we are the center of the narrative? And that's everything to me.
It definitely looks a lot different, because I think, back in my own childhood, up to about third grade, I was in like a Black community. Then I had a time for about half of a school year, not even half, maybe the first semester, I was in a school where I was the only Black child in the whole school, because my mother was an educator and she went to teach at this school and I was with her. And then I went into a neighborhood that was a more, of a mixture of all. But I loved being in, those early stages. And there's no shade to anybody. Doesn't mean I don't like anybody else, and none of that. So don't take what I'm saying to mean that. But it's just something about being in a community where, you all are coming together, you're supporting one another, like in this story. And of course, there are the people who do bad things, because there were some people who didn't do good things in this book, because that's just that's real.
Do we know what happened to Alice's that watch in her pocketbook?
Right. I mean, things do happen that are bad, no matter where you are.
Absolutely.
It's just something to be said for that. And, to understand that I know, because a big thing for you is talking about our ancestors and the people who came before us. A lot of them did not have the opportunities to be in these, mixed communities. So they became who they were, being in and amongst their own people.
Well, and you think about how these communities actually came together. Like New Jessup is based on the way that Greenwood and Hobson City and all these places came together, where you're a bunch of people who have bought a bunch of used up farmland or land that nobody else wants. In this instance, it's the swamp. And then it's like, okay, well, have at it. Now, you know us, we're going to make a way out of no way.
Right.
And so when we're in the community, we don't have the opportunity to sit around and say, woe is me. I'm so sad we're in the swamp, because like they said, everybody's out here in the swamp with equal opportunity to get fever and get snake bit. We need to get to work. We don't have time to sit and rest on our laurels. You have gifts and talents that can help us out of this mess. You have gifts and talents that can help us out of this mess. Let's put all that together and make something of this. And so I think when you have a community that comes together like that, and then you have the next generation of stewards, and then you have these continuing generations of stewards who know that history, then that gives us the impetus to keep these communities going forward into future generations.
We have a comment from Phyllis. Read and reviewed the book. All the characters and the issues it covered. Yes. Thank you, Phyllis. She has read most of the books that I talk about. So it's I love you, Phyllis.
Thank you.
But as you were talking, I'm gonna have to talk to my mom. I always talk to her right after I finish these shows. She does watch, but she is from a community in Southeast Georgia that is right next to a military base. And I do recall her telling me that our family roots was originally in like a little community that was on the base, but then they moved away from there. So that's making me wonder, like,
See, now I told you, we all these communities, I don't care if it's a couple city blocks or 14,000 a person city, all these communities have such rich history. And our elders have been out here talking about it. And now that our elders are getting older and some of them are transitioning or starting into the early stages of dementia, we need to be recording these stories. Because this is real history that we need to maintain. So for anybody out there, that's my TED Talk and my stump speech and all that other stuff.
Yes. So, Mom, we're gonna get on the phone. We're gonna talk about that. We need to figure that out. We need to do some more digging, because it's just important to know that. And for me, the more that I know, it builds up something inside of here. Because we know that we come from strong stock, so to speak. We know that, just to have survived the Middle Passage and to survive all of the things that our people have been through, we know that. But when you can have like specific things to say, okay, in my family, we did this, in my community, we did that. Now, I know that in you choosing Alabama, it's because you have, a strong family history there.
I'm biased.
Yeah, so you are biased.
I'm not ashamed of my bias.
And I told you earlier, my dad's family has people in Alabama. So you were making me, okay, I need to dig, because me being in Georgia, I'm right next to Alabama. So it would be easy for me to do some digging. But how does your family feel about you writing this book and centering, your home state or their home state in the book?
Oh, they're so thrilled. Every time they show up on one of my tour stops, it was so beautiful, because it became this interplay. Because, there are a lot of, when I wrote this book, I really thought, I'm writing this book, I had no idea, no thought about commercial success in my head. I really thought I was going to self-publish it and write it around Alabama, saying, hey, y'all, I wrote this book and it's full of our family anecdotes. So now when I got the prize, and of course that changed slightly, but they come to the events, and they'll sit there and they'll say, this is the story of our great uncle O'Connor. And I'm like, shh, you can't do it. Don't tell all our business. But they're so thrilled to see a version of Alabama that they want to see, that we've grown up knowing about. And, I just thought, if we can be this excited as a country, as a world about Wakanda, we get so excited thinking about the idea of Wakanda. I'm like, these are actually real places too in the United States where our ancestors and elders built. So my family, when they see the book, they come out and they want to engage in the conversation. And and tell all our business, but they're all so thrilled about it. And if this was a book that they couldn't be behind, I never would have published it. I never would have.
What a blessing and a gift that you have given them, just to be able to, celebrate you, of course, and all you're doing, but also just to see their stories told. Have another comments like, this is why they don't want today's youth, both Black and white, to know Black history. Our strength is in our history and subsequently in our future. Yes.
I think that's right. I mean, there's so much about our history that is so empowering. I mean, to know that our ancestors and elders literally built these spaces with their hands when they had nothing else. I mean, to me, I think about that, and I think that they deserve to be honored. My cousin Bobby, you were asking about my family. I remember after the New York Times thing came out, and I had sort of texted around. I was feeling myself, and I'm the baby cousin.
Okay.
And so I said, hey, cuz, we were talking on the phone. He said, hey, cuz, do you see the thing about the New York Times? And this is probably a year after the prize, all the other stuff. He said, oh, yeah, maybe now I'm going to have to start bragging on you to my friends.
Oh, wow.
And I said, only now? And what he said to me? They're proud of me, but he said, all this you're doing with your book, raising up the community, you're a young, which is my mama's maiden name. Okay. He said, you're a young. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Okay. And so for me, he yanked my chain right quick, first of all. But second of all, it really put me in this place where I've always said I wanted to be, which was that this work is a celebration of our communities, of our elders and our ancestors. It's not about me. It's about them.
What are you hoping, besides just the wonderful story in and of itself? And I'm going to ask you about the cover before we get ready to go. Believe it or not, we're getting close to time.
I can't believe this. It's been so fun.
That's having fun. But just outside of being able to read a really rich, well-written, beautiful story, to see the empowerment of these various characters, because many of them are empowered in different ways, and then just to see the evolution of Alice herself. What do you want people to take away from the story in terms of how we can build our communities or support our communities better?
I really see and have hope that this book will be a bridge for generations, for us to sit down and really talk to our elders and about the ancestors, about their experiences. I think that when we disconnect from our elders, we can be unmoored and feel like every slight, every microaggression is something new under the sun. I'm here to tell you it's not.
Right.
And so when I draw from the strength of my ancestors and elders, certain slights are things that I know to be injustice. It's not that I don't want to address it, but it's that I feel like I don't know if it's a generational roadmap or some sort of ancestral roadmap to say, I got this. I'm strong enough for this. And to think about how we can do that together as a community, I want this book. I feel like this book can be a real bridge between the generations to help empower ourselves to say, look, ain't nothing new under the sun when it comes to anti-Blackness in this country. But that doesn't mean what people say we are does not define who we are and what we're capable of.
I know that's right. You see, I'm rocking like, yes, amen.
It's true, right? I mean,
right.
Who gets to define who you are? Somebody else.
Right. And there is a lot of that going on, on large scale as well as smaller scales, that people try to define who we are because of what they think they know or because of what they've been told or what they just choose to believe. So it is very powerful for us to be able to say, you know what, it doesn't matter what you say, your opinion of me is not my business, basically.
Yeah, I mean, look, and people say to me, I don't want to read your book. And I say, you know what? Everything ain't for everybody. Right. I'm not for everybody. This book ain't for everybody. But I've had so many young people ask serious questions about this book. Or they'll come and they'll say, I saw this movie. My teacher showed me a movie about Greenwood. And the movie about Greenwood was all the destruction and chaos and whatever. And I'll say, well, what businesses did they tell you they had in Greenwood? And they won't know. And I said, see, that's what you should be learning. You should be learning about our empowerment, about our lives, not about our destruction. We need to be mindful that anti-Blackness is not going anywhere. I'm not saying that we're not honest with these kids, but when you only tell the young people, or any of us for that matter, that our entire history in this country is just trauma, degradation, and violence, what do you expect people to take in? So when these young people actually see, oh, there were towns and settlements where we were building one another up. We had communities where we were thriving. Greenwood had photography studios. I had somebody tell me they wanted to be a photographer. They knew nothing about the photography studios in Greenwood. I said, do your homework. But that's why I'm saying I hope that this book is a bridge for that. I hope we stop continuing to just tell one side of a narrative, because, they say a half truth is still a whole lie. And when you continue to only tell one side of our history in this country, you still whole lying to a whole bunch of us.
Right.
So, it's up to us to continue to keep these narratives alive so we can continue to empower our community.
Yes. That's so powerful and true. And find our place to call home wherever home is going to be. Because I didn't get deep into that, but that's the whole thing, finding home, finding your place. That's a big part of what this story is all about as well. And once you find that place, doing anything and everything you can to protect your peace within that place. So
like Alice says, I don't have to worry about being put in my place in New Jessup because every place is my place.
I know that's right. You don't have to walk in a back door, side door.
When you walk in, when you say every place is my place, you walk a little taller. You hold your head higher because this is yours. There's a sense of ownership that this is where you belong.
That's right. So tell us about this beautiful cover.
All right. So I told you Alice, she comes to New Jessup. She's all Alabama. And she's been raised to have these gifts and talents in a place that actively wanted to suppress them. So when she comes to New Jessup and she's surrounded by Blackness, she can thrive. Right. And so you see this rich Black on the cover. I really, really wanted that Black because that Black represents to me the Black belt soil, the night sky, and Black people. And so, and these flowers, if you're familiar with the flowers, there are moonflowers on here, some four o'clocks and gardenias, and other flowers that flourish and bloom at night. So I really wanted to show this rich, lush, flourishing in Blackness. So that's why it's because Alice, when she becomes the Moonrise, she's flourishing when she's surrounded by Blackness.
All right now. Yeah. I love it. I love it. And your explanation just makes it even that more beautiful. Like, all right now. Yes, just that beauty. It's definitely a beautiful book. So yes, Cheryl saying beautiful cover. Yes, it is. It is. Because, that's one of the things, of course, before you've read a book, you can read a blurb or whatever, but a lot of times what draws us even before we get that far is we look at a cover and think, it will interest me or it doesn't. And I love flowers. My mom and I were talking about that the other day. I'm a flower girl, so I see the flowers.
Yes, you see the moonflowers in there then.
Yes, I'm automatically drawn, to that because of the flowers. So now, of course, this book has been out it's been out in this form for a couple of months or so. And I know, I hate to ask, but I'm going to ask. I know that you're promoting, and you have a lot of wonderful events that if you all follow her on Instagram, Twitter, go to her website, you'll be able to see all of the things that Jamila has coming up. But are you in the process of working on anything new, whether it be short story, another full-length book? What can we be on the lookout for?
So I am working. I do have some irons in the fire. I am working. Right now, I'm working on a short story collection I'm super excited about. And I also have about half of a new novel finished. So, you know, it's short fiction is the place where I live. I have a few short pieces out. I have a couple essays out too, including one coming up in the sun. But you know, it's just what I can find time to like sit down and play with. I love short fiction because it allows me to just play and experiment and try different things I haven't been able to try. And of course, long fiction is just where I get to explore certain ideas in longer form. So I've got sort of both. I'm working on sort of both tracks while I'm out here doing the thing and promoting. But you know, writing, it's always important to me to keep writing.
Yes, that's very important, and we want you to keep writing because you do such a wonderful job with the ways in which you tell a story. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of the other things that you have coming up for sure. And I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna put it out there. I don't know, and you don't have to say, but this to me, this would be a good movie.
Hey, listen, I've heard that before, and I already said I'm putting it into the universe. I want Regina King to do this movie because remember how she did One Night in Miami? I feel like the cinematography, the acting, all of it. I feel like it's hers. It's hers.
Yes.
Okay. Speaking.
All right.
No, the tongue has the power of life and death, girl.
That's right. That's right. That is absolutely right. So yes, we are putting that out there into the world, into the atmosphere that we want Regina King to take to run the show for the film version of Moonrise Over New Jessup. I'm just putting the whole thing in there. Like, be specific.
Exactly.
You know, the whole thing in there.
Mrs. Friend said, "You got to pray. You got to ask for exactly what you want."
Exactly. That's what we want to see happen. Because I just the way that it's written and the way that the characters are described, locations, all of that. I just think it would translate really well into something on screen. So
I would love to see Alice and Raymond's love story play out on the big screen. I'd love to see New Jessup on the big screen. So many people have asked me, is New Jessup a real place? I'm like, I want it to be. And I would love to see how it would translate the time period and everything. I would love to just see all of it on the big screen.
Absolutely. All right. Don't forget to smash that like button. That's funny. I know her. That's she's funny. That's my best friend, actually. Like, smash that like button. Like, all right. Continue success today. Yes, we definitely are looking forward. You know, this book is now in the canon of wonderful Black women writers. I'm sure that you've got more in you. So this is just the first of many, and I look forward to seeing you again the next time. So thank you so much for your time and your beautiful smile.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I've had such a good time.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Jamila. Hold on for 1 second because I'm going to announce the next couple of weeks, and you might be interested in these people. Well, I don't know if you have time to read, but you'll see who's coming up next. So I'll let you go, but hold on for me for a second.
Oh, of course. No, of course.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for this wonderful conversation. I really did enjoy talking to Jamila. I loved reading the book. It was just, I learned a lot. It caused me to really think about, some of those questions like, what's the deal with that town in Alabama where my daddy's people are from? What about that town that I know my mom's people, or that community that my mom's people were originally in? Now I have to do some digging. So, I just suggest that because as we were talking about earlier, it just gives us a stronger connection to our people when we know where we came from and some of the things that we have managed to be victorious in. So please take a look at her book and then do your own digging for your own story, because that's important. So next week, I am super duper excited to have a return guest with us. We are going to have Sadiqa Johnson on to talk about The House of Eve. So look for that. That's a week from today. And then in 2 weeks, we have an author who was out several years ago. She hasn't put out a book in a while, but I am super duper duper super excited to have her because she's somebody I read I said back in the day, so to speak. So we will have Connie Briscoe in 2 weeks, who will be on to talk about her book, You Never Know. So let me drop my banners right quick so you can have actual dates. So on the 27th, we will have the House of, oops, and I dropped it. We will have the House of Eve. And then on April 3rd, we will have You Never Know by Connie Briscoe. So please, everybody, tell your friends if they love to read, or even if they just like to hear about the stories, and tell their other friends that read. Please let everybody know. And as my best friend says, smash that like button, use that share button, and we look forward to seeing you again the next time. Take care and have a really great week. Bye-bye.